Welcome to the Charles Vanhorn Show. Today is June the 12th, 2020. It has been a few months since I have recorded a podcast, but trust me, the blame can be squarely placed on my shoulders. In fact, I was really just lazy and didn't want to do the work, but after a lot of prodding from my friends and my wife, I decided, let me go ahead and start the podcast again. In my first podcast, I said we will focus on race, religion, and politics, which is in line with a Facebook group that I formed many years ago with several of my good friends. Little did I know that race, religion, and politics would affect our lives in such a drastic way in 2020. So much has happened since my last podcast. So much has changed and so much is changing. So let me delve right into the quagmire of our present societal situation. So that we can understand the present, we must go back to the past. The Black community has always been the backbone of the Black community, but it has been victimized by various forms of systematic racism, whether it was the literacy test to determine if you were smart enough to vote, or the segregationist policies that prohibited Black people from enjoying the same privileges afforded to white people, or bad cops coming into Black communities, planting drugs and guns on unsuspecting Black men and then arresting them for crimes that they did not commit. These interactions with police caused a void in Black communities, a void that has persisted to this present day. Because in the Black communities, there were no fathers really to lead the way. And the weight of raising the next generation of Black children was placed entirely on the backs of the Black woman. Trust me, I know about racism, overtly and covertly. I know all about the police lingo of fitting the profile, where police claim to be looking for that elusive suspect, doing so only because they want to see your ID and your information and run it through the database to determine if you are another Black person with an outstanding warrant. I came to realize early on in my life that police were operating on a quota system that was in fact nationwide, and that we as Black people were the product, all because they needed to maintain or increase their police budget. I know for some people, the truth can be a harrowing experience. As a matter of fact, apologists for police misconduct often scream and say, but that was in the past and it's all behind us now. Or that the victim should have complied with the cops when the cops pulled them over. I would have to disagree with the apologists because these tactics are still being played out in the Black community. But they're played out on a larger scale and behind the scenes. If we look at the pandemic and how the coronavirus, a virus that has killed over 100,000 Americans, but in percentage-wise, it has killed more Blacks than whites, you may ask the question, why? The real reason is systematic racism. Because when you have poor communities, citizens living on welfare who are on or beneath the poverty level, low incomes, poor housing, basic or no education, underlying health issues, redlining, and so on, then you are left with a segment of the population who is severely and adversely affected. When I watched the video of George Floyd, as I have watched the videos in the past of other Black people who were killed by cops, I was reminded of my uncle who was beaten so badly by police during the 1980s that he could barely walk into the house. And the warning that the cops gave him when they kicked him out of the car. If you say anything about this, we will come back and kill you. This has really been the mantra that black people have had to live under. Terrorist cops who have terrorized black communities. George Floyd's murder was the catalyst that was needed to bring attention to the behavior of bad cops in police stations all around the country. But it also shined a light on a larger problem we have within our society, where people had become oblivious and desensitized to the cries and the suffering of the oppressed. People were sort of saying, it's not happening to me, so it doesn't concern me. When in fact, when one of us suffer, all of us suffer. When black people are harassed by police and incarcerated for years on bogus and trumped up charges, it causes the community to become suspicious of the police and to not trust the police, who are there to supposedly protect the citizens of the communities, but not terrorize them. When I hear people say black people have been afforded the same opportunities as white people, my eyes begin to roll into the back of my head. And I said to myself, really? Because if they're speaking from a place of truth, then they would know better. But in fact, I have come to realize that many of them are speaking from a place of white privilege. Here's a crude illustration. If two groups of people came to a country, one group white and the other group black, the white group came because of opportunity and the freedoms afforded them, but the black group was brought here to work for the white group against their will, supplying all of the free labor, free daycare, house cleaning, cooking, yard work, building cities and towns, and fighting alongside their slave owners in wars against the original inhabitants of this land. And this happened over a period of 400 years, years in which the white group had a distinct advantage, an advantage in which to accumulate wealth, land, and prestige and power. But the black group had no wealth, no property, nothing to pass on to their descendants. But after 400 years, they were told, you are now free. So go out there and make something of yourself. It is asinine to think that the group of blacks would be on equal footing after a 400-year head start given to their white counterparts. But sadly, this is the ideology of some, that we should just stop complaining and just work hard, even when the very system has been rigged against us. So when you see the younger generation of black and white, Latino, Asian, and every ethnicity imagined marching in the streets for equal justice, for change, and screaming that Black Lives Matter, you must understand it is because they cannot continue to uphold a system of inequality. A system that says all men are created equal, but whose actions say otherwise. The young people across the world are speaking out against injustice. They're speaking out against the Pledge of Allegiance, which pledges liberty and justice for all, but in actuality, it offers liberty and justice for some. Oftentimes, I have heard that Lady Liberty is blind, but sometimes I think that she is blind when she chooses to be blind, and that she can see when she wants to see. I'm not really a big fan of Lady Liberty right now because she has allowed a lot to go on within our country that is very heartbreaking. I would like to paraphrase Dr. King right now, and I really hope that as a society and as a nation that we get this. I really hope that this becomes a country in which my children and my grandchildren are no longer judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Because if we can come together and work through our biases and our prejudice and our differences, by communicating and understanding one another, then we would come to an agreement that the arc of the moral universe is long, but that it bends toward justice. We can then understand that we have an obligation to uphold by doing our part of treating one another equitably and by envisioning an America of the people, for the people, and by the people. I know that we have come a long way as a nation, but we still have such a long way to go. I believe that we can do better. I am an eternal optimist. I believe that our better days are ahead of us. Yeah, I believe within my heart of hearts that from this uprising, from this cry in the streets, I believe that something good is coming out of it. I believe that people are seeing one another. I believe that people are starting to feel one another. People are beginning to understand one another. And people are beginning to realize that an injustice against one is an injustice against us all. This is not the divided states of America. This is the United States of America. So we must come together if we are to continue as a nation. We must come together regardless of our skin complexions. We must come together and make things fairer. We must make this system balanced, because it cannot just benefit 1%. The system must benefit us all. So once again, thank you for joining my podcast. You can connect with me on Twitter, Charles A. Vanhorn, or on my Facebook group, Race, Religion, and Politics. So until next time, stay safe and keep fighting for equality.